Thank you. For those of you who all attended last year in person for the S5? Anybody here last year? Whoever wasn't here, who went back and watched all of the videos and so on from last year's S5? Good, and hopefully this is new. So what I'm trying to not do today is repeat what I talked about last year. So my idea is last year was kind of a scaffolding to talk about what is trauma-informed, what are those practices, and then this year we're going to try to give you some really specific tools to help you address some of the concerns we have about whether or not we are trauma-informed when we deal with students and our school system. So just a little bit about myself. I'm currently the Deputy Chief of Police for the City of Sumner. I've been working in law enforcement since 1991, so a little over 30 years now. And my last job, I spent 23 years with King County Sheriff's Office. In 2003, I was assigned to our special assault unit with the Sheriff's Office as an investigator where I investigated sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, and child death. And up to that point, I come from a law enforcement family. Up to that point, I had been mostly working in patrol assignments, and I was a good patrol officer. One of my favorite parts of law enforcement has always been interacting with other human beings, and I've always felt almost like a psychological or social scientist doing experiments with everybody I interact with in a good way, not like weird Pavlovian experiences or anything. But really, when I interact with another human being, I've always been fascinated with how humans react to especially stressful situations. And I think that's what made me a good patrol officer, is that curiosity every time I went into a new encounter. So when I got assigned to the Special Assault Unit as a detective, one of the first required trainings I attended was, at the time, it was taught by Harborview Sexual Assault and Traumatic Stress Center. It was a mandatory training. It was back then it was a 40-hour course that was mandated for all people who would be conducting interviews of children who had been were reporting sexual assaults. And what I found out in that training was that there is a way to interact with another person who's been through trauma that opens a lot of doors to getting accurate and reliable information from that person if it's done properly. Has anybody else here attended that required training? Most people who've been in detective assignments, a lot of school resource officers go to the training. I highly recommend that anybody working with children who may encounter somebody who's been traumatized, especially if they've been sexually assaulted, that you find a way to attend the training. But what it taught me was that the way I was conducting my social experiences in the past, the way I was interacting with other human beings, was often completely wrong. And I believe that a lot of the struggles we have in our profession, and I'm going to lump everybody in this room into that, what I call the protective professions, right? Whether it be a school administrator, a school resource officer, or a school safety officer, we are in these jobs to protect other human beings who are vulnerable, right? What I found out in that training was the way I had often been interacting with people by being very directive, by kind of controlling the encounters, so on and so forth, was actually oftentimes making things worse. And not only was it making it so that it was difficult for that person to recover from their trauma, it was also making it less likely that I was going to get accurate and reliable information from them, which made it harder for me to do my job, which made it harder for me to put into to enact protective factors that would make sure that it didn't happen again or that they were being protected moving forward. So for me, I kind of had an epiphany coming out of that training, and it completely changed the way I interacted with victims of crime. It changed the way I interacted with witnesses to crime. It changed the way I interacted with my subordinates and coworkers, and it also changed the way I interacted with my family. And what I'm going to be talking about today, when I talk about trauma-informed, I'm going to talk a little bit about the science behind what trauma does to us as human beings. I'm not going to turn any of you today into a therapist. Please don't even go out and pretend you are a therapist unless you've gone through and gotten all the proper credentials. But I am going to teach you how to be a guide for yourself and other people and give you some really tangible skills that you can use to help people address underlying traumas that get in the way of healthy functioning, right? We're going to focus on something called resilience and wellness. And when we talk about this idea of trauma-informed, really that's what trauma-informed is. It's understanding the underlying causes of dysfunction and then doing things to do something about it, right? I think all of you in the room got in this field because you want to do something heroic, right? You might deny it now, but the reality is we all want to be heroes. We want to save the people who are vulnerable and need our help, right? Well, the way we do that is that we are compassionate to other people. And when I say compassion, I think it's important that we talk about what we mean by that. When we talk about compassion in our society today, it's a very rare commodity. There are a lot of people who think they're compassionate, but they aren't. In our society, there's an abundance of sympathy, and sympathy is when you recognize that somebody else is suffering. But just recognizing someone else's suffering does nothing to alleviate that suffering, right? And that's what we all do in our society. We see somebody else and say like, yep, it's pretty jacked up. They're having a hard time, right? The next step after sympathy is empathy, and that's you recognize their suffering, but you also are able to understand that suffering and walk in their shoes, right? And that's a step in the right direction. There are a lot of people in our society who understand empathy, oftentimes because of their own lived experience, but also because they're curious and they try to find out more about what the person's experience, right? The rare commodity is compassion. What compassion is that you have the sympathy to identify suffering, the empathy to understand it, but then you actually do something about it to alleviate it, right? And that's why all of you are in this room, because you're compassionate people. But I think what we failed in as a profession is we have not equipped people in the protective professions, and I'm going to refer to you guys generally as officers today mostly. We have not equipped officers with the skills that actually help them be compassionate. And all too often we find ourselves in situations where our presence or our actions often make these things worse. And we haven't really had that self-awareness to talk about that and try to fix it. And it's not until we experience our own suffering, either directly because of something traumatic that happens to us or that secondary exposure to suffering and trauma that really makes us truly understand it. It's not until we've lived our life long enough to truly experience it that we really start to recognize that what we're doing should only be improving things and not making them worse. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today is how do we make things better? How do we improve ourselves? And by improving ourselves, we also are going to have more of an impact on the person we're interacting with. So when I talk today, the overarching term is trauma-informed school safety. I'm going to give you some of those tools. A lot of the skills I'm going to be teaching you today are from something called the Community Resiliency Model. There's an institute called the Trauma Resource Institute down in California. They have a program called the Community Resiliency Model. I would encourage everybody to explore it. That I'm going to be teaching a little bit today to teach you to become a guide in community resilience. I've gone through a process to be what's called a teacher of the Community Resiliency Model, which means I can go out and teach other people how to be a guide. But as a guide, I'm going to have you walk away today with some of these skills that are going to help you go out there and do some good, again, for yourself and others. Trauma Resource Institute also has a similar program called the TRIM, which is the Trauma Resiliency Model, and that's for certified therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists that can actually take these same concepts we're going to talk about today and use it in the therapeutic setting. So I like one of the concerns about courses like this, when I have an hour to talk to you and I have, for me, about 20 years of experience in education, trying to understand trauma and how we in protective fields can help improve a trauma survivor's experience and move forward. It's really hard for a lot of people you're going to probably see talking yesterday and today to boil down 20 years of experience into a 1-hour presentation. So my goal today is to do two things. One, we're going to cover some overarching concepts and philosophies, because I think that gives you the context for the rest of the presentation. But then I'm also going to teach you some very tangible skills. I don't have enough time to teach you the whole community resiliency model, so I'm going to give you pieces of it that I think you can go out there and use even later today. We're going to get a chance to actually practice it as well. For those of you who have been using your guide and doing journaling, I'm going to apologize in advance that I'm the journaling guy. I actually was hired by ESD 105 last year to create that student guide, the first iteration of it. My master's program and everything else was on this idea of self-reflective journaling and exercises where you practice skills, and then you use those practice sessions to inform your journaling processes. That's a thing that I've been geeking out on for a long time, and I found it to be very, very effective for those people who want to use it. Because otherwise, I think what happens is you come to one of these conferences or trainings, you walk out with a lot of great ideas, and then nothing happens, right? So the idea with the journaling is we want you to actually take these ideas, make them into something that's meaningful to you, and then go out there and be compassionate and do something about it, right? So again, I apologize for the journaling, but also you're welcome. So fundamental concepts for my little hour today that I'm going to talk. If you will go back and watch the videos from last year, I did a presentation on procedural justice and trauma-informed practices. That was kind of building the scaffolding that we're going to lay some more skills upon. The idea of procedural justice, or the LEAD model, was what I talked about last time. And procedural justice in a nutshell is that when you are in a position of authority and you're talking to somebody else who's subject to your authority, they are more concerned with how you treat them than they are with the decision at the end. People are really not as concerned about outcomes. They're more concerned with being treated with respect by a person in a position of authority. So procedural justice looks at any system. It looks at a criminal justice system. It looks at leadership systems. It looks at our healthcare system. It looks like at our judicial system. And it empowers people in positions of authority to interact with people in a way that the person feels as if they are heard. It makes them feel as if that they understand the process of decision making, and it makes them feel like they were treated with dignity and respect. So the LEAD model stands for listen, explain with equity and dignity. It's something that I was on a team that created that as part of training that we did for Department of Justice back in 2012. And we've gone across internationally teaching that program to different law enforcement agencies and prosecutors' offices and such. So if we think about any person in a position of authority, if they follow this model of procedural justice, that people are going to be more trusting of them, regardless of whether or not their outcome was desirable. All right, so there's the scaffolding. We need to build our systems in a way that are procedurally just, and which means we focus on process of decision making and making sure that person understands the decision, and then the outcome is going to be much more accepted. All right. I also talked about trauma-informed interviewing, and I took some of the best hits from that 40-hour child interview school, and I talked about how you could go out and apply that to interactions with particularly a student who's been through something traumatic. The goal being that we want to get accurate and reliable information to inform our decisions, right? So when we go through and we interact with somebody, again, we're using the LEAD model, but when we have somebody who's been through trauma, there are very specific things we need to do in addition to the LEAD model that are going to help us, again, make that person feel safe and comfortable and much more likely to be able to articulate what happened to them. So today I'm going to be layering upon procedural justice and trauma-informed interviewing, and we're going to talk about community resiliency model. So our learning objectives, when you finish today, you're going to be able to identify and describe trauma responses and behaviors that may impact interactions, right? If we are going to respond to those types of behaviors, those types of reactions to trauma, we need to understand them and identify them, right? So we're going to talk about how you can identify those. We're also going to personalize some strategies that can facilitate trust and communication with a trauma survivor. Community resiliency model are a set of basic skills that we all probably have heard about at one point in our lives. What I like about community resiliency model is it takes a lot of things that we've all probably done at one point in our lives or learned about at one point in our lives, and it puts them into a package. Puts them into a package that's really easy to teach to others and to implement into our own lives. And then finally, we're going to create an action plan for interacting with trauma survivors utilizing research-based model that integrates wellness skills. So again, today with the scrutiny that we're all under in our profession, everything we do needs to be reinforced by science. So community resiliency model has a ton of research and study behind it to reinforce the concepts. And a lot of it, like I said, is things that you've probably heard, seen, or done in the past, and we're going to relabel those things so we all have a common understanding. And then we're also going to give you some ways that you can go out there and implement it and actually have an impact, again, to be those compassionate professionals that we all want to be. So I try not to just lecture today. We're going to do a lot of interactive stuff. So this is, when I say interactive, it means that I'm going to expect you to interact. So common reactions during and after a stressful or traumatic event. What are some common emotional reactions after somebody experiences something stressful or traumatic? What was that? Shock, okay. Anger, what else? Sadness? Grief? All right. What are some common physical reactions? Crying? Increased heart rate? Aggression, okay, that would be a behavior actually, but what else? Increased blood pressure. Increased respiratory rate. How many cops do I have in the room? Commissioned officers. Does this sound familiar? When do we in law enforcement typically talk about those experiences? What's the context usually for the discussion where we talk about all the things that he was just describing? The OODA loop, right? When do we talk about that? Officer-involved shootings, right? So again, when we talk about these physical reactions, auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, right? These are physical reactions to a stressful event or experience. What are some common spiritual reactions to something traumatic? What's that? Meditating, okay. A positive one, right? Good. Negotiations, who said that?
Negotiation with spirituality, but I make it through this, and then I'll start with this.
Oh, okay. You start to make a deal with God, is what you're saying? Awesome, all right. And that kind of implies that we question our spirituality, right? We go through something traumatic, we start to question the meaning of life, where we fit into the world, all that kind of stuff, right? Any other spiritual reactions? Go ahead. Disbelief, right? When I think about spiritual reactions, it either makes us more or less spiritual, right? And that's kind of that common human paradigm that we experience, right? When we have something traumatic, that thing that we usually would hang on to is what we start to question. What are some common behavioral reactions? You said aggression, right? That's a great example. Behavioral reactions. Isolation. What's the opposite of isolation? You seek community, right? Again, you guys are in protective professions. You're always going to go to the negative, right? So when we talk about these reactions, we typically think about a negative reaction to trauma, but there's an opposite to all the negative ones we've come up with today as well, right? And people who are healthy and resilient are the ones who go to those positive reactions to that traumatic event. What are some common relationship reactions? Yeah, find a bond, right? So if we're pissed off because our department's treating us like crap, who are we going to hang out with? The other ones who think the department's treating them like crap. That's our profession, right? And does that help us or hurt us? It could go either way, right? Maybe eventually we all come out of it together, but again, depending on if we're looking at it positively or negatively. Any others? What are some other relationship reactions? Go ahead.
Cause either stress or increased need to have your spouse or significant other around you?
Yeah, more or less affection, right? That bond between you and people who are probably unrelated to that trauma are either going to be broken or strengthened. So which are we going to feed is my question, right? And in our society today, so what's the American response today to trauma? Is it positive or negative? Negative, right? Luckily, in the last few years, we have not experienced any traumatic events in this country or in our profession. Sarcasm. What are some common thinking reactions? Disbelief. Thinking it can't happen to you, right? Somebody mentioned earlier the negotiation, if not with God, with something else, right? Starting to think through, is this job do I still want to be in this job? Right? Go ahead.
Lessons learned. You used to play back in my mind, what could have I done differently?
Yeah. Or what did you do right? Let's make it positive, right? Okay. So again, we all as human beings have experienced some sort of traumatic event. Some of us have really big events we've experienced. Some of us a series of small ones, right? But again, the human condition or the human reaction to these things is very typical, right? And again, it's all within a range. So here's what the science shows. It's all the same things you guys already said. The one that stands out relationship-wise is irritability. I would say that in America today, that's been the most common reaction, is that irritability, that hypersensitivity, right, to these other things, that negative viewpoint, or that confirmation bias, right, or that negative confirmation bias. But again, these are the same things you guys already said. I'm not going to spend a lot of time to it. But when we're talking about our professions and the work that we do, it's really important when we're dealing with somebody who's been through something traumatic, especially if it's an acute trauma, something that just happened. It's really important that we be able to help them recall what happened, because we need to make decisions, right? But we also need to do it in a way that helps build resilience. The traditional style of interacting with somebody who's been through trauma often looks like an interrogation. And I've seen a lot of well-intentioned people, especially in the heat of the moment when there's something going on, that they get very directive, very controlling. And the reaction to somebody who's been through trauma is more of this stuff, right? So when we talk about our trauma-informed response, we want to do things that are going to increase recall, increase reliability of that recall, and also help build resilience, because the interaction we have with them right now is probably not as important as the reaction we have with them tomorrow or the next day or a year from now. Because it's as time goes on, if we've helped build resilience, we're going to build a system that's more supportive of people who've been through trauma. We're also going to learn how to deal with our own trauma and be able to show up as the person who's going to be facilitating and not depleting. So some of the considerations I want you to keep in mind because of our profession that are a little bit unique about interacting with a trauma survivor is the mere fact that somebody is interacting with or being interviewed by a person in a position of authority, particularly somebody in uniform, may in and of itself be a traumatic or triggering event. Right? And it's really easy, especially I see a lot of school resource officers who do an exceptional job of this, to really learn how to, destigmatize the uniform, get people accustomed to talking to officers, so on and so forth. But there are a lot of students it's taken a lifetime for them to build up a distrust of people in uniform, and we need to go in there expecting that and understanding it. There's also some physiology and neurobiology behind recall and resilience we're going to talk about in a few minutes here. But whenever we interact with somebody and we start to recognize that they're having a stress response or they're being triggered, we need to immediately check ourselves, do kind of a self-check to see where we are with things, but then also start to recognize those behaviors, those reactions, and then take steps to try to improve that encounter. Memories and behaviors are impacted by those survival responses. Again, we talk about it in law enforcement a lot with officer-involved shootings, and we give officers a pass when they're involved in a critical incident and then they don't recall every detail with accuracy. But how often do we discount somebody who's been through something traumatic when their recall is not accurate and when there's evidence or facts that are counter to what they're telling us, and we don't chalk that up to a physiological response, but that we actually say that it's a deception or dishonesty, right? So we need to be careful when we're dealing with a trauma survivor to understand the difference. There are significant social and emotional factors involved with somebody who's been through trauma that we need to educate ourselves on so we can respond appropriately to those. And then there are challenges within our criminal justice system, just the way that it functions, that there are large numbers of students who are always going to be treated differently, whether it be because of the color of their skin or because of past experiences. And we need to be really careful when interacting with people that we stay present in the moment and focus on recall and resilience, not on what the system's going to do to them later or what it's done to them in the past, right? And we're going to talk about how to kind of do that. And then there's a lot of internal, external supports and conditions that can either improve or make worse some of these impacts of trauma. So again, if the goal is recall and resilience, here is the ideal model for how we can encourage somebody to give us accurate and reliable information. The first thing we need to do is provide an opportunity to recall memories and share details of experiences. Now, when we're talking about trauma-informed responses, we have to create these opportunities, but we also have to be okay if that person is not prepared to do it, right? We may not be the right person, and this may not be the right day to get this information that we need, right? And sometimes we need to be okay with that, and sometimes we need to pass it off to somebody else, or we need to take a pause and come back later and try again. So when we think about providing these opportunities in the community resiliency model, we call it invitational language. And invitational language means that we are intentionally telling that person that we're giving them an opportunity to, but we also are giving them an opportunity to pause and wait and maybe circle back around later. And there can be, sometimes it feels almost painful, the slow process of building rapport with somebody. But what I will say is, in my experience, and I've viewed thousands of interviews with children who've been physically or sexually assaulted, I will tell you that a little bit of time building rapport at the beginning of these conversations with somebody save you a lot of time later when you get to the important stuff that we need to get. And I've seen a lot of people who don't build rapport and they end up spending a lot of time, or they never get that child to talk to them at all because they didn't make that investment to begin with. So again, building rapport and building trust is really important. But again, it's because you need to make sure they understand that they have that opportunity. And the other thing I'll say is, when it's clear to somebody that it's an opportunity to provide information, they're much more likely to provide that information. If you make it feel like it's an obligation to provide information, a lot of trauma survivors are going to shut down and not talk to you. We also need to create an environment that encourages memory retrieval and promotes resilience. I'm going to talk a lot during my presentation about our nervous system and how our nervous system reacts to trauma, and how we can change that environment the person's in to make it much more likely they can access those memories. And what I want you to go into these interactions thinking is, what can I do to support you in this process? Right? Again, procedural justice is about the process is more important than the outcome. And when we go in there with that mindset that we're there to support this person in the process of recalling and retelling information, they're much more likely to be able to come through for that and get us the information we need. So in the community resiliency zone, one of the unique things about it is the way this information is presented right now. So again, the last 20 years, I've spent a lot of time trying to learn about trauma, trying to learn about resilience. And somebody mentioned, I think the presenter before me talked about, let's have everybody do yoga, right? Yoga is a great tool to use when you have time to take a pause and plan ahead and schedule a class, or load it up on YouTube and play along, right? But again, a lot of times right now when I hear law enforcement talking about wellness or resiliency skills, it's about a yoga class, or on the other extreme, it's the CrossFit class, right? Or it's about breathing exercises. Really, when we talk about wellness and resilience, it's everything, right? But the focus of community resiliency model and their definition of the resilient zone is something that I find really powerful. So this resiliency zone, if you look at these two black lines, this is the zone within which we can be a healthy, resilient human being, right? And as we go on in our lives, we experience different events, different relationships that create different emotions and responses within us. So as long as we stay within that resiliency zone, we can experience happiness and joy, we can experience sadness, we can be excited, we can be sad, but as long as it's within our resiliency zone, it doesn't necessarily impact us in our normal human functioning, all right? So again, like it says here, you can be annoyed and angry, but not feel like you're gonna lose it, right? You can be sad or lonely, but not feel like you will be washed away. For most of my career, I have talked to my family and friends about the fact that I'm dead inside. Right? And I spent a lot of years investigating child abuse and sexual assault and child death, right? In a lot of ways that kind of, kills your humanity, right? And I was really proud of the fact that I was dead inside, and my wife would always talk about, I was always so calm, right? And I always thought that what that meant is I was always right here in the middle of my resiliency zone. What do you think it actually meant? What was I actually experiencing? Detachment, right? I was not in the middle of my resiliency zone. I was below my resiliency zone for about 20 years. And I will tell you that in my experience with some of the things that I went through, my primary and secondary traumas I've experienced, I've had physical injuries from the job. I've been attacked. I've had really good friends killed in line of duty. I've had family members die unexpectedly. I have 12-year-old twins that were born 4 months premature. Had to have a friend who was a priest come in and do last rites for my son in the hospital twice because we thought he was going to die, right? These are severe traumas I've experienced, right? Because I had spent so long thinking I was dead inside when actually I was below and outside of my resiliency zone, that I was non-reactive to these things around me. I paid a huge price physically, and there was a huge physical toll. And about 10 years ago, I started falling apart because of it. I started experiencing injuries. I started experiencing digestive issues, sleep issues, all these other things that built up over time. And I finally hit a point where the wheels fell off. And I ended up having a series of surgeries and medical procedures to try to correct some of the damage I had done to myself physically because of stress, right? Now, this resiliency zone is something, again, I felt like the less emotion I showed, the more I was able to do my job effectively. But the reality is, with that, what feels like stability during the experience actually comes a loss of joy and a lot of the highs that you're going to experience in life, and also means you lose out on some of the lows that help you appreciate the good times, right? So as a cautionary tale, I'm here today to talk to you about some of these skills that I found to be effective. So in community resiliency model, we talk about this resilient zone, and that's that zone within which you can be a happy, healthy, functioning human being. When I talk about trauma-informed practices today, I'm first talking about what you're going to do for yourself. Those same skills that are going to work for you are also going to help you interact with other people who've been through trauma. One of the ways it's going to help those other people who've been through trauma is by you showing them how to be emotionally intelligent, socially intelligent, how to be self-aware and use self-regulation skills. By showing them those skills, the way the brain works is a lot of it, they're going to copy it. When you go in calm and compassionate, it's going to make that person feel calm and compassionate as well. It's going to improve these interactions immensely, right? If you go in there and you interact with somebody who's homicidal or suicidal, and you go in there and exhibit these wellness skills, they're going to come down to your level more often than not, right? And again, I always think about like, scenarios we used to run. I ran our training division for King County Sheriff's Office for a number of years, and we would do a lot of scenario-based training. And officers would come into a situation where it was a suicidal person with a knife, and pretty soon it gets to this thing where they were yelling at the person over and over again to drop the knife. And at some point, the one cool head would walk in and be like, "Hey, what's going on today, man?" And that person would start talking, right? So again, the first thing we're going to talk about is how do you get yourself within your resiliency zone? And then part two of that is how do we help other people get in their resiliency zone as well? So when, say we're operating in life, we're chugging along, we have our resiliency zone that we've feel comfortable in, right? We can still have those highs in life and the lows in life and function like a healthy human being. I will say the other thing about officers, is anybody else here a Dan Carlin hardcore history fan? Anybody else ever listen to that podcast? You know what I'm talking about. So Dan Carlin, it's an amazing podcast. He has like 16 hours of podcast about Genghis Khan. If you have 16 hours of time to kill, it's amazing. But one of the things he says, he talks about military leaders over time, and he looks at the world wars and a bunch of other significant events. He had talked a lot about World War II and the Japanese and German military leaders, and he said they're like regular people, only more so, right? They exhibited extremes of every behavior, and in law enforcement, we are made up of a group of people who are living in the extremes, right? And they experience and exhibit a lot of these extremes of behavior. So the cops' version of resiliency zone may be a little different than a lot of other people's version of resiliency zone. But what happens is we're within our resiliency zone, we're functioning normally in life, and then all of a sudden there's an event, right? That event can be an actual acute trauma event, or it can be something that triggers us back to a past event that was traumatic to us. And when we experience that event, we experience what's called being bumped out of our resiliency zone. And the timeline for this can be seconds, it can be minutes, or it can be years, depending on how serious this response is. But when we get bumped out of that resiliency zone, it means that we start to either become edgy, irritable, experience mania, anxiety, and panic, angry outbursts, or pain. That means we're stuck in our high zone. There's another version of that, which means that we experience depression, sadness, isolation, exhaustion, fatigue, and numbness. That's when we're bumped out into our low zone. And when we experience those things, or we see somebody else experiencing those things, it can become very apparent. The higher zones are usually more obvious. The lower zones are sometimes harder to see. But we've all experienced times in our lives when we've experienced something that caused us to be bumped out. So ideally, what we're going to do is we're going to intentionally widen our resilience zone. And we do that by practicing wellness skills. And sometimes that's yoga, sometimes it's CrossFit, sometimes it's having a community that supports us, sometimes it's being in loving relationships, sometimes it's building an organization that takes care of the people who work in it so they have somewhere to go when they're struggling, right? Sometimes it's about creating safety for students and staff members in our schools by creating that safe environment, right? But what we want to do is intentionally widen our resiliency zone, because that gives us that greater capacity to stay within our zone even when we experience a life stressor. Right? So what I'm going to talk to you about today is how do we increase or widen our resilience zone so that we're more prepared when we experience something that would potentially bump us out of that resilience zone. So it's going to require we do a little bit of discussion about some brain science. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. I'm going to actually start at the bottom here. So there's three primary portions of our brain. One portion of our brain is called the survival brain, or the primitive or reptile brain. This is the one that carries out fight or flight functions during a stressful event, right? It just reacts. It doesn't process the information. It also controls our autonomic nervous system, things like digestion, reproduction, circulation, breathing, and it responds to sensations. And the reason it's actually closest to our brainstem is because information comes from our sensations that we experience on the extremities of our body and goes first to that primitive center in our brain so we can have a reaction without thinking about it. The next part of our brain is called our limbic area. That's our emotional center for our brain. And this is the area that assesses risk. So it's like the radar system that's constantly looking for risk or threats. And then when it identifies something that's a threat, it actually sends off an alarm system that kicks into effect that primitive portion of the brain if it isn't already activated, so we can have that fight or flight response to that stress. And then the third portion of the brain is our cortex, or our thinking brain. This is the one that makes good decisions. It solves problems. The problem with the way our brain works is there's a couple problems with it. One problem actually is that our emotional center of our brain, that amygdala, the portion of our brain that assesses risk, it works off of patterns, and those patterns are built by past experiences. Our brain actually spends more time filtering information than it does understanding that information. So we look at how our brain works. It's literally taking in billions of pieces of data every second from all of our sensations, but it's filtering that information so that we can focus on the things that are most important. The problem most of us as human beings have is those traumatic experiences have created a broken or an inaccurate filter system. So a lot of times we're going to react to things that our limbic part of our brain identifies as a risk that may or may not actually be a risk, right? And that causes that over or under reaction. The other part of our brain is once that limbic area activates, it takes practice and it takes a skill set to be able to reactivate our cortex, our thinking part of our brain. So the more extreme that reaction, the harder it is for that thinking part of our brain to kick in so we can actually solve problems. And I would say like one of the problems we have in this country right now with understanding police use of force is it's hard for most people who've never been in a life and death struggle to understand the type of reaction we have when we think our life is in danger. And it's easy to see that that person, that officer's life may not have actually been in danger after the fact when we view body cam footage or talk to witnesses. But in that moment when they're experiencing and reacting, they're not using the thinking part of our brain that most of us are operating in. They're actually reacting with their survival brain, which we have very little control over. So again, this is just to understand trauma and how our brain works, right? So think about the three parts of the brain. I've seen this presented to kids. I have my son who's special needs. He's actually blind and on the autism spectrum. He's one of the twins I mentioned, was born really early. I saw his teachers talking to them about the brain, and they talked about the hand model, and they said the forearm is your brain stem, the palm of your hand is that primitive part of your brain, your thumb, when you lay it over like this, is your amygdala, and your amygdala is constantly looking for problems, right? When you roll your fingers over and make a fist, this is the normal thinking way our brain works. The problem is when that amygdala identifies a risk factor, the thinking part of the brain pops off, and they call it popping your lid. And then all that's operating then is your amygdala, which is firing off, right? So with kids, they talk about, like, they see a kid overreacting, and they train them this model, and they'd be like, hey, put that thinking cap back on so you can make better decisions, right? So I like that model. Again, brain stem, primitive part of your brain, amygdala, and then the cortex. Again, here's some more information about the amygdala. It's that appraisal system in the brain, signals the rest of the nervous system when it identifies a threat. And again, it talked about those patterns or templates that we use that are often inaccurate. This is also the other term we have for template is bias, right? And the bias is how we react to things that we experience around us. It generalizes information. It sounds that alarm when there's a perceived threat. And then the fight or flight response kicks in, and we have almost no control over what that fight or flight response looks like, unless we've had a lot of training and kind of have a skill set of response that we know to activate, and our system can do it without having the thinking part of our brain do problem solving. And it's all organized by past experiences and has a negativity bias, just like the rest of you in this room. Okay, sorry. Autonomic nervous system. There's two parts. There's a sympathetic and parasympathetic portion of our autonomic nervous system. This is the part of our nervous system that controls our internal organs. It controls our breathing rate, our heart rate, our pupils, our blood pressure, sweat hormones, creation of saliva, and our digestive processes. Our parasympathetic and our sympathetic system reacts to stress and increases our processing of blood through our system to kind of prepare us for a fight, and it decreases the digestion and saliva. Parasympathetic is what prepares us for rest, right? So when we identify that threat, our sympathetic system activates. That's the fight or flight response. When the threat is no longer there, hopefully we can get back into our parasympathetic mode, which is rest and digest. And again, this actually lowers the heart rate, blood pressure, constricts our pupils, decreases sweating and stress hormones, and increases our digestion and saliva, right? It's important to recognize that there are these two responses with our autonomic nervous system, because as a person who's interacting with somebody who's been through trauma, these are the symptoms you want to watch for to help you figure out how you're going to interact with that person. It's also, as a trauma survivor, and everybody in this room is a trauma survivor if they lived in America in the last 2 years, much less if they've done the job that we all do, right? It also helps you, by understanding what these are, it helps you recognize in yourself when you're having that reaction in your autonomic nervous system, so you can help to self-regulate and recognize those symptoms. Fortunately, when we look at brain science, this is not all a negative, sad tale. There is a lot we can learn by practicing skills. There's something called neuroplasticity, and that's the ability to rewire our brain. And there's also something called neurogenesis, and that's the ability to create new neurons and connections. The way we rewire our brain and create new connections is to practice wellness skills. Does anybody in here meditate on a regular basis? One person? All right, that's more than usual. Has anybody ever tried meditation because they heard it was a really good thing and failed miserably at it? All right, a couple people. Who refuses to ever try meditation? That's probably everybody else. All right. So what we're going to talk about with community resiliency model is not meditation. It's about accessing your central nervous system to improve outcomes, and also to be able to focus on interactions so that that person that you're interacting with, or when you're self-contemplating and dealing with your own stressors, is much more likely to be engaged and resilient. So the reality is our nervous system is a biologic process. And when we see somebody over or underreacting, when we see somebody manic or we see somebody depressed, we automatically think they're a bad person, right? And when we start to experiencing those highs and lows in ourselves, we look at ourselves negatively, right? Which only perpetuates the problem, right? When we think that our reaction is a bad reaction or a sign of weakness, that we're depressed or that we're manic because of an event, we beat ourselves up even more, and that only makes those matters worse, right? But it is a biologic process, and after any kind of highly stressful event, there are some people who are going to be afraid even when that threat is gone. We call that hyperarousal in law enforcement. Most cops are afraid that everybody's trying to kill them even when they're not at work, right? So when we think about these biologic processes, we've all experienced it to a certain extent as well. Even a small amount can cause a person to be afraid, right? It's that when they get triggered or when they have trouble letting down after a traumatic event. And some individuals can get stuck in their high zone while others can get stuck in their low zone, like I talked about, right? So I want you to start thinking about this as a biologic process. Two reasons we want to think about this being triggered or having the stress response as a biologic process is, one, it gives us a way to recognize it, and two, it gives us something to do about it. We're going to focus on two aspects of it. We're going to focus on anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is the structures. Physiology are the functions of those structures. When we talk about CRIM, it talks about how we observe and use our knowledge of these patterns of the nervous system to help us distinguish between distress and well-being. And we're going to redirect people or ourselves toward well-being and away from that stress. It's also important for us to recognize what trauma is, because nobody in this room wants to admit they're a trauma survivor, but everybody is. So depending on what research you read or which speakers you hear talking about it, I'm going to talk about 3 different types of trauma. When we look at the typical things we think about with trauma, like experiencing a wartime disaster, a sexual assault, or homicide, that's a big T trauma. When we think about these smaller things like failure, work stress, family stress, loss of meaning in life, that's something we'll call a little T trauma, right? I call that being in law enforcement. And then the third one is cumulative trauma, and that's the pileup of either small or large traumas over time. There's also something called complex trauma. I'm not going to get into that today. But I want you to give yourself a little bit of grace and a pass and recognize that you're a trauma survivor. And now I'm going to give you some skills about what to do about that to improve your own functioning and hopefully also improve safety in your schools. I think it's also to recognize there's a researcher from way back when named Maslow who did a lot of research into stress and human psychological and physiological responses to stress. He built this pyramid, which is the hierarchy of human needs. At the bottom of the pyramid are our physiologic needs. That's our food, water, warmth, shelter, rest. Once we have all those needs met, we're able to move on to the next layer of needs, which is our safety needs. That's safety and security. Once those are met, we can move on to belongingness and love needs. That's about intimate relationships, friendships, right? Once those are met, we can move on to our esteem needs, which is our prestige, our feeling of accomplishment. And then ultimately, we want to all reach the highest level of human needs, and that's our self-actualization, which means that we achieve our full potential and we're able to be creative. Now, most of us as professionals are typically operating in these three higher layers, right? But I also want you to recognize that there are going to be times in your life, and there are going to be even more frequently times you're going to interact with students or other professionals in the schools who are actually operating in these lower levels because they may not have a home to go home to. They may not have food when they arrive. They don't feel safe or secure. When we look at DV survivors or sexual assault survivors, a lot of times it's really hard to interact with them and make them feel safe because they actually are not safe, right? So one of the things we need to recognize is that it may be a perceived sense of not being safe, or it may be an actual sense of not being safe. But the first step to making these interactions positive is that we need to create an environment where that person, at least in the moment, feels safe. And as I mentioned before, sometimes us showing up in uniform makes them feel less safe. So we need to figure out how to minimize that. Because the reality is we all enter in these interactions with a lot of baggage, our own baggage, our experiences, things that our job's done to us, things that have happened to us at home. And when we interact with somebody else with a lot of baggage and we have this collision, how can we not expect things to go sideways? So the first thing we need to do is empty our own cup and be prepared to enter these interactions. I don't have time for that one, so I'm going to move on, sorry. If you want, on break, I'll play the video for you. Anybody recognize that video? It's from Forgetting Sarah Marshall. It's the surfing lesson. It's awesome. Basically, the gist of it is do less. And when we talk about community resiliency model, I'm going to encourage you to do less and not more, because we are all in our professions uncomfortable with silence. You can tell I'm uncomfortable with silence because I keep chattering up here, right? But the reality is when we interact with somebody who's been through something traumatic, being okay with silence, giving them time and space is often a really, really important skill that very few of us work on and practice. So I'm going to do something called a resiliency pause. And this is actually also going to be teaching you the first two of the 6 wellness skills from the community resiliency model. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is put down anything in your hands. If you have a computer open, please close it. All right, so first thing I'm going to ask you to do is sit comfortably in your chair with your hands and arms free. I want you to hold both hands up with your palms facing up. I want you to shift your attention to the palms of your hands. Have your attention stay on the palms of your hands. And think about what it feels like on the palms of your hands right now. And I'm going to go around and pick on people, Chris, who I don't know at all. What do you feel right now on your hands? You feel coolness. What else? Empty, like my heart. Okay. What do you feel on your palms? Cool? You just copied him. Okay. Anything else? All right. Now I want you to rub your hands together vigorously. Rub them together. Keep rubbing. And now relax. What did you feel? What changed? Friction. Okay. So that's physically what changed. How did it feel? Palms of your hands feel when they were rubbed together? Got warmer. Okay, great. Did you feel anything different? Warmth? Tingly? Tingly? Copier. Safe. Why safe? Warm? Neutral. Great. Okay. You can relax for a second. So I just taught you the first 2 steps. The first thing I taught you was something called shift and stay. And that's when we take our attention and we shift it to somewhere else in our body and we stay there. And we pay attention to how that part of our body feels. Shift and stay is a way that we start to access our nervous system. I just had you do it with the palms of your hands, but when we use tracking in the community resiliency model, we're actually going to use it to access our nervous system. And what does our nervous system control inside our body? I talked earlier. Autonomic nervous system. What does it control inside our body?
Heart rate?
Heart rate. It controls our breathing, our internal organs, right? So when we use shift and stay in community resiliency model, we're going to shift our attention to our internal organs. We're going to stay there, and we're going to experience and pay attention to what they are experiencing. Because when you are under distress, your autonomic nervous system kicks in, and it's going to raise your heart rate, it's going to raise your blood pressure, it's going to raise your breathing rate. And what we typically pay attention to is the emotional response to that physical change. In our society, we rarely pay attention to the physical change that occurs inside our body. So the first key is tracking, and everything else in community resiliency model means that we shift our attention inside our body, we stay there, and we start to track how it feels. And when I ask you to explain to me or describe to me how your hands felt, that's the tracking, that's the description, right? So when we talk about community resiliency model, we're going to focus on, use the word neutral or safe. We're going to focus on neutral, safe, or resilient topics. And when we start to pay attention to how our inside our body feels, when we shift our attention and stay there and start tracking our nervous system, we're going to start to experience the gateway or the key to start to control our emotional reaction to stressful events. All right, so we're going to do, in a minute here, we're going to do a little partner exercise where we're going to add in our first layer is shift and stay. Our second layer was tracking. And our third layer is going to be resourcing. So one of the other things, technically, what we did there was something called grounding. We were actually focusing on something external to our nervous system. We're focusing on how the palms of our hands felt, which actually brought us into the moment. And when we're dealing with something stressful, it distracts us from that stressful thing and helps us recognize, hey, we're here right now. We feel neutral or safe. Right? So one of the basic skills that we would get to in the advanced class would be grounding, but that was technically a grounding exercise as well. So as I mentioned, shift and stay, tracking, and resourcing, these are the three primary skills we teach in community resiliency model. Super basic skills. It's stuff that we all do all the time except when we really need it. Right? When we're under stress, as human beings, we almost enjoy the emotional experience of the stress instead of minimizing the impacts on our performance by focusing our attention on the things that really matter, and that's our internal nervous system processes. So shift to stay is we're going to shift our attention away from something unpleasant, and we're going to stay on a pleasant or neutral sensation. Right? So for you, rubbing your hands together was pleasant. That's something you can focus on as a resource during times of stress. That rubbing your hands together, some people do it naturally when they're cold or nervous. Right? So for some people, that's actually a gesture, which is another one of the skills that we would teach in the full class, a gesture that's going to help them find wellness. But again, different people are a little different. You may have them shift and stay to their earlobe, right? If you notice you're starting to see the physical example that the person is starting to be bumped out of the resiliency zone. You see them breathing heavy. You see them sweating, right? You see the other signs that they're starting to physically react. Sometimes you can ask them to shift their attention to their earlobe. Describe how it feels, and it's a way to distract them from that nervous system response and actually get them present in the moment. The key to it is to focus on that tracking and how that neutral, pleasant reaction feels. When you're going to invite, again, I mentioned earlier invitational language, we're going to invite them to pay attention to a sensation so they know what's happening inside their body. This is the foundation of stabilizing our nervous system, right? This is not therapy. This is a basic human skill. I've coached athletes longer than I've been in law enforcement. I'm a weightlifting coach, and I coach sports performance. The first skill I teach athletes when I start to work with them is how to be in touch with their nervous system so they can leverage that nervous system for better performance, right? And as males in our society, we're very comfortable if I teach you how to breathe when you're bracing to shoot a gun or to lift weights. We're not super comfortable talking about how to breathe so we can access our nervous system during times of stress and respond better. But again, it's something we need to destigmatize. This allows for choice as to what we pay attention to and to focus on our well-being. And then resourcing. We're going to do a quick resourcing skill. I have 5 minutes left, maybe 10 or 15 if I push it. Okay. All right, so what I want you to do is everybody take out a phone. Almost everybody's got a phone. If you don't have a phone, you're going to use your human brain to be creative. with whoever you're sitting next to, or if you're not sitting next to somebody, find another group. I want you to each find something on your phone. It could be a picture, it could be a website you look up, anything on your phone. If you don't have anything on your phone, then I would just want you to think about something in your brain that's either neutral or pleasant. And I want you to pull that up on your phone or hold it in your mind. And I want you to really just focus on that thing. Something preferably pleasant, but at least neutral. Just really focus on it for a minute. Now I want you to shift your attention inside your body. I want you to stay inside your body and think about how your internal system is responding to this positive or neutral thing that you're focusing on. Really focus on your internal processes. Think about your heart, your lungs, your muscles. Look at that picture. Think about that thing. And I'm going to invite somebody to volunteer and share something that they're experiencing. Anybody want to share something that they experienced when they started to focus on their internal system? Calm. Okay, you said calm. Specifically, describe what calm felt like inside your body. Shoulders relaxed and his chest did something. Something happened in there. Okay. So you are alive. So he felt it in his chest area, right? Anybody experience somewhere else in their body? Go ahead.
My heart, I could feel it in my neck.
You can feel it in your neck, okay. What did it feel like?
Just like I could feel the blood pumping like a little bit more.
Okay. So one thing you're experiencing, again, is for some people, they feel a release. Some people feel like that part, like I have a bad neck. I've had a lot of neck injuries and back injuries. When I'm stressed out, I feel a lot of tension there. When I start to focus on this neutral or pleasant thing, I feel a release in those areas where I have injuries. I feel it actually like a tingling sensation where that tension starts to release. And for that moment, while I'm focusing on that thing, if I pay attention to inside my body and I start to focus on what that feels like, it actually intensifies that response and can take me out of moments of stress and put me back into something restorative. All right? And I don't care what that thing is for you. I just care that you have a thing, right? Something that makes you feel good about yourself, something that's positive, right? For me, it's a picture of my family I carry on my phone, and when I'm stressed out, I'll look at that and I'll think about how they make me feel. Now, with everything, there are negative experiences. Like I said, I had some negative experiences with my children being born 4 months early. My son almost dying a few times. So when I look at that picture, sometimes I start to drift to that negative side. But if I truly focus on the positive side and my autonomic nervous system response to that neutral or pleasant feeling, it helps me leverage that when I need it in times of stress. So this is something you can do to widen your resilience zone, is choose moments every day where you're going to focus on something positive. It sounds cheesy, but what it's going to do for you is it's going to intensify that resource so that when you're dealing with something stressful, when you're getting ready to go into a stressful meeting, or you're going to go interview somebody who you know is going to be a negative or caustic interaction, it helps you go in there as a better person, more prepared, right? And this is just one set of skills. This is also something you could do with somebody else that you're interviewing or you're building a relationship with. When you notice, you recognize, based on their anatomy and physiological responses to that stress, you notice that there's a change in their behavior. You can shift away from what you're doing, try to get to know them a little more by having them describe to you something neutral or positive, and then having them shift their attention inside their body and tell you what it feels like. Go ahead.
You also accomplish the same thing by just utilizing controlled breathing?
Yes and no. If controlled breathing is something that person's worked on or it's helpful to them, it can be great. A large percentage of trauma survivors, breathing is actually going to intensify the negative feelings because it causes a sensation or response like claustrophobia. So breathing is a great exercise to work on and build, but when you use it on the wrong person, it's going to make things worse. So breathing is one that I'm very careful about. I use breathing when I notice, like I'm interacting with somebody and I notice that I'm starting to build a relationship with them. I notice they let out that big sigh. It's almost like they've given up, but what it actually is them actually releasing tension in their diaphragm. So they let out that. I'll actually point that out to them. I'll say, hey, just a second ago, you let out a big sigh. Tell me about how that felt. So if they access the breathing as a positive or neutral thing, I'll call them out on it, and I'll have them focus on their nervous system and how they responded to that. I won't introduce breathing as something that I want to introduce into the topic. Sometimes it can be really negative. Now, when you work with athletes or people who've practiced breathing, it's a great skill, and it's also something you should work on to build, maybe as a resource. So, did that answer your question? But having used this a lot of times on trauma survivors, I've seen it go sideways because that person may start to hyperventilate. And in that room where you're trying to interview somebody or get information from them is not the time to de-escalate somebody who's now in crisis. So just be careful with it. But if it works, use it when it works. Just be careful about who you use it on. And when it starts to go sideways, try to divert. Any other questions there? All right, so resourcing, again, orientation toward well-being, a hobby, activity, a place, faith, or a strength. Another way to do this, especially if you're going to start to build a relationship with a team, like this is one I like to do with my team at work, the cops who work for me. I'll do this type of exercise, and that's when I have them write down 3 resources, circle one of those, and write down more details about that resource. It's called intensifying that resource. And while they're doing this, I do that exercise of shift and stay, accessing their nervous system, and then that's something that they're going to be able to hang on to later during times of stress. So the 6 skills always come back to tracking. We talked about resourcing and shift and stay. The other 3 are gesturing, help now, and ground. Help now are like emergency responses we can use. An example of a help now resource is to have a trauma survivor push into a wall while you're talking to them. And it actually releases some tension, and I can go talk for a couple hours about why it works. But when you start to notice somebody really stressing, you can have them push down on the table in front of them. There's different ways for them to actually access the sense of stability and safety that they get from having something heavy or pushing into something. But that's just an example. But really what we're talking about here is the conventional perspective of trauma is asking somebody what's wrong with you. The trauma-informed perspective is what happened to you. The resiliency-informed one is what is right with you. Having people focus on the positive, having them tell their story, starting with when they felt safe and working backwards is an example of a way that we can build resilience. And also focusing on what are their strengths. The perspective shift is about resetting our nervous system to support recall and promote resilience. So what's your action plan? How are you going to create an action plan for interacting with trauma survivors? Research-based model integrates wellness skills. So off the top of your head, does anybody have an idea for something they could work into an action plan to implement something we talked about today? And again, fix yourself first. If there's something you learned here today that you may try, then your action plan may be, hey, I'm going to try this thing that I learned about today at least once a day. Or go out and try it once and then call BS on it if I'm wrong. Anybody have an idea of something they could write in an action plan? I got all day. Taking a resiliency break, right? Take a pause from a stressful day, focus on something positive, divert your attention inside your body, and think about how your nervous system is responding. So community resiliency model from the Trauma Resource Institute, I'd encourage you to research more into it. A lot of schools use the right response training as a way to teach how to de-escalate. Community resiliency model pairs very nicely with right response because it's a little more tactical and specific to trauma, whereas right response is a little more general. So I've seen a lot of school districts that use right response also implement community resiliency model into their programs. I think it's a great program. It's a little bit expensive. The process to become a teacher takes about 6 months to go through the whole process, including trainings and teach backs and all that kind of stuff, but it's a really good program. We actually, at the state level, we've implemented it into our required training called VCERT for sexual assault investigators. So it is required for everybody who's going to be assigned as a primary duty to investigate sexual assault that they need to go through training that includes community resiliency model. And we actually teach them how to implement it into that interview environment so that they can control their own nervous system response as well as that of the person they're interviewing. And a bonus, there's an app that goes along with with CRIM, the Community Resiliency Model, called the iChill app. A great action plan would be, I'm going to download the iChill app and read more about Community Resiliency Model. Now you've implemented a trauma-informed, scientifically researched and backed process. If you want to meet an action plan, you want to create an action plan that's easy to meet, there's one to it. You could also share the iChill app with other people It basically takes everything I talked about today, but it also incorporates the other wellness skills that I did not cover and gives you kind of a synopsis of each of them. There's audio and video that can go along with them. And then there's also some skill practice that you can implement using the app. Any questions? If anybody disagree with anything I said and want to talk about it? No? Anybody agree with anything I said and want to talk about it? Go ahead.
Just a comment. A few years back, I had a lot of personal grief, family tragedy, trauma, and I sort of bottled everything up inside emotionally. At the time, I thought it was a sign of strength.
Yep.
But manifested itself. Back, I had problems with AFib, my heart. Never had a heart problem before. But now I realize that, that's not the way to deal with it. And then keep it followed up.
Yeah.
So, long same line of deal.
Sure.
Like, thought I go, hey, I'm handling this, got everything covered. No,
So what have you done to improve? What are some things you've actually...
communicate with family, loved ones more.
Nice.
And keeping things inside, keeping it to myself.
Yeah. Well, and one thing
I do better at getting it out now.
Sure. And one thing I've experienced is when I start implementing these skills, it actually intensifies those relationships, right? So while I'm talking to that loved one and I'm having a good relationship and good communication with them, I start to, again, shift my attention inside my body, really pay attention to my response. It makes that response, that release, even more intense, and it becomes intentional. I'm not just riding the roller coaster of emotion, but I'm creating opportunities for that resilience, right? So I think it's really powerful. It's something you can experiment with nobody else knowing you're doing it. But again, I think what it does is it takes a lot of these great skills and puts them into a nice package that's really pretty easy to implement for yourself and others. So you guys are all blessed now as community resiliency model guides. If anybody asks, you can testify in court to the fact that you went through training to become a guide. I don't have a specific certificate for that, but you are hereby... Oh, download the app and you can be an expert.
All right. Thanks, Andy, so much. Round of applause for Andy.